Hello and welcome to Behind the Mission, the World Bank Group's new series that will take you behind the mission that we have here at the World Bank and showcase some of our current job openings, including showing you the work on the ground that we're doing here at the World Bank Group. My name is Zubaida Robinson. We hope that this series will truly inspire you to consider joining us here at the World Bank and help end extreme poverty and increase shared prosperity. Now, today is a particularly exciting day here at the World Bank Group headquarters. As you can see behind me, we are having a special job fair. Now, as part of the World Bank Group's effort to increase its support in fragility, conflict, and violence settings, or FCV as we call it here, the World Bank Group is hosting a special recruitment drive. Now, by the end of this year, the World Bank Group aims to fill 100 job positions. How are we going to do that? You are going to find out later on. Now, later on during the show, we'll be talking to a recruitment manager here at the World Bank and a senior economist in the social protection and jobs area, particularly in the FCV setting, who will share more about their experience and what skills are needed for these kind of positions. You can be part of this conversation using the hashtag #BehindTheMissionWBG. Now, before we go into that deep dive, I want to encourage you to stop and watch this short video that will show some of the work that we're doing in the FCV settings. Take a look.
When we left Bosnia, each of us had one bag with them.
I grew up in Palestine. It's a conflict-ridden country, and life has been very difficult.
I was about to turn on the faucet to drink some water, and my mother rushed in and said, "Don't drink the water."
My village didn't have electricity, and my siblings and I had to start with kerosene lamp at night.
So at the age of 21, I had an accident, a motorcycle accident.
The rebels, for all intents and purposes, were using us as human shields.
This is why I worked for the World Bank.
This is the difference in perspective I bring to this, to the work in the World Bank. I'm from a developing country. I'm from such a country, I lived through the civil war in that country. And for me, this is real.
With a personal history as a refugee and also as an immigrant, coming to the World Bank, I really have an affinity toward development.
We are really committed to development, and whatever the price is.
Development to me is the only path I know.
Very committed people at the bank.
Good electricity, reliable supply of clean water can really change the destiny of countries.
The achievement I am proud of and that keeps inspiring me in my work is
setting up a youth volunteering project from scratch in Lebanon.
Trying to solve very big problems of local communities.
Major efforts to improve the livelihood of the Somali people.
The support we provided in Haiti after the January 2010 earthquake.
The city was able to save as much as the amount of the loan. It changed the way it provided education in slums, and it really was able to save enough to invest in basic infrastructure, in health, in education.
When I encounter people, poor people, beneficiaries from our projects, I feel that there is some kind of easier communication between us, because we understand that we are all facing difficulties, different difficulties, but difficulties in our lives.
If there was a girl out there who was like a little me struggling, but has access to education, for me that was my escape, literally and figuratively.
The impact I really wanted to make was in developing countries, because I said in some senses that's where my heart is. That's who I want to help more, and that there are not enough people helping them.
To me, it's a meeting of heart and mind.
Every time I go to the field and I talk to people, beneficiaries or project participants, I get a very big sense of humbleness and also a lot of emotion around what's coming in the future.
Because that kid slumped out in some refugee camp without any clothes, barely able to feed. That kid could be somebody greater tomorrow. It's the reality of me. I mean, I'm not talking about a story. I have lived that existence.
That's why I work for the World
Je
Bank.
travaille pour la Banque mondiale.
Trabajo en el Banco Mundial.
That's why I work for the World Bank.
مشان هيك بشتغل بالبنك الدولي.
I work for the World Bank.
Nkolera World Bank.
And that's why I work for the World Bank.
Non-World Bank Group ka meron pang
That's why I work for the World Bank.
That's why I work for the World Bank Group.
Now, if you've just joined us, welcome back. My name is Zubaida Robinson, and we're here at the World Bank Group, and you're watching Behind the Mission. A special recruitment drive is going on right now as part of the World Bank Group's effort to increase the support that it has for countries that are affected by fragility, conflict, and violence. And we're always looking for passionate talent. So if you're interested in international development, do stick around. Now, I would like to welcome to the show today Jeremy Sawadogo, a recruitment manager from Human Resource, and Rebecca Grun, a senior economist for social protection and jobs. Welcome, Rebecca and Jeremy.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Jeremy, I will start with you. I know we've had some chats earlier on, but this is now where it gets real. Like, people want to hear it straight from the expert. Why are we aiming to fill 100 jobs positioned this year, and what makes working at the World Bank Group, particularly in FCV settings, unique from other organizations?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Zubida, for the question. Let me just begin by stating that fragility, conflict, and violence are key challenges for development. They keep us from really reaching our SDG goals, and they keep us from putting an end to extreme poverty. And these actually affect both low-income countries as well as middle-income countries. So we're putting 100 jobs to the market. We're trying to source talent for those 100 jobs because we believe that that's where we need to be in order for us to actually be able to end extreme poverty. And so we need to find people that are passionate about development, people that are committed to ending poverty, people that have the right skills, so we can put them in those places so they can help us really stem the tide of violence and fragility so that we can go about the business of doing development work.
Very well. Rebecca, what's your take? Your work takes you to a lot of places that suffer from fragility, conflict, and violence. Now, what motivates you to work or do this kind of job?
Thank you, Zubaida. See, in the FCV settings, the challenge is double. The challenge for the people receiving our project is double. Not only are they the poorest, but they also face institutions breaking down around them. Say education goes down or health goes down, the state becomes more fragile. So the challenge is double. The human aspect is doubly affected. And well, in some of the areas where I work, they weren't insecure to begin with, but I'm committed to these people. So I definitely wouldn't leave them alone now that the challenge is double. Yeah. So double the challenge, double the motivation.
Oh, wow. So a question for both of you. And how does the World Bank Group ensure the safety of staff and their families in these kind of locations? Particularly, Jeremy, please talk about details when it comes to protections, including access to healthcare. And for you, Rebecca, what is your level of confidence with the bank when it comes to your safety and working in these kind of environments or countries?
I think that's an important question. I think that's in the mind of anybody who is deciding or choosing to go work in a fragile and conflicted country. So I think it's a legitimate question. It's good to know that we have a security apparatus that we can deploy 24 hours. Our security office in Washington, D.C. has local connected security forces that we work closely with 24 hours. We also do an assessment of any of the countries before we send our staff in there. We're not going to place staff in a place or in settings that are going to be detrimental to their safety and security. For example, we're no longer in Yemen today, even though we're working with the United Nations to actually do development work. There's no bank staff member placed in Yemen. And once you're also in the country, you will get security briefings on a daily basis. You get this through your mobile, but also through security briefings. And before we also place anybody in some of those locations, we have them do some security trainings. We have what we call safe training so that they can go in there knowing what the conditions are, what the safety risks are, but also knowing that the bank is looking after them in case of need.
Right. Rebecca.
Yeah, every World Bank office, every World Bank country office in a country that is affected by FCV has a security specialist. And this specialist stays up to date with the daily intelligence. He knows the history of the conflict, the interested parties. He knows what is dangerous, which areas are dangerous. And at the beginning of every mission, we receive an up-to-date security briefing by him or her. And we learn which behaviors to avoid, which areas to avoid. And we only stay at hotels that are vetted.
Yeah.
And I must say, in the places where I go, and I'll go on mission again next month to a setting that faces some violence issues,
okay,
I feel very safe. The hotels where we stay have great security protocol. They're not vulnerable to the type of violence present in the country. And the security specialist is really well informed and really up to date. So they are a bit on the conservative side. So following their advice, my teams and I feel very, very secure.
This is very reassuring to hear. So what I'm learning is, the country assessments, the security briefings, and now what you are just telling me, because Rebecca, you've been on the receiving end, you know exactly what it involves. It's really reassuring to hear. Now, as a follow-up, Jeremy, there are cases where our staff can be more at risk at certain locations. For example, staff members who are part of the LGBTQ community. What kinds of protections are there for them?
I forgot to mention that we also work very closely with the United Nations systems in terms of evacuations, should that happen to be the case, and that's an important point to make. We work everywhere, and indeed we are going to be working in certain settings where certain behaviors with respect to sexual orientation may or may not necessarily be accepted. And there are cases like that in certain countries. So what we typically do is orient people before they depart to those countries. We also talk with the local authorities so that they understand that we value diversity and that among our staffs are going to be people who would have different sets of behaviors that may or may not necessarily be valued in that country. We have an organization called Globe within the bank. We also have an HSD department, which is the health and services. So they will provide briefings, counseling, but also advice in terms of how one might continue to espouse to their values without necessarily putting themselves at risk.
Right.
But make no mistake, if at any time we feel and determine and are certain that somebody's safety is at risk because of their sexual orientation, we'll remove them from those locations, and we'll also have a conversation with the local authorities.
Yeah, I mean, that's really good to hear, because we do want our staff to feel safe and secure, and it's good to hear that there are measures where that safety to be compromised.
Yes.
Now, if you have just tuned in, you are watching Behind the Mission here at the World Bank Group, and we are talking to Jeremy and Rebecca. Jeremy is a recruitment manager, and Rebecca is a senior economist, and they're all sharing their experience working on the ground in an FCV setting, that is fragility, conflict, and violence setting. And Jeremy is sharing with us, what some of the guidelines that the World Bank Group has for staff who are about to join or who are part of the World Bank Group staff. Now, right now, we are diving deeper into our recruitment campaign to support countries facing fragility, conflict, and violence. So if you're interested in working in these areas, stick around, be part of the conversation, tweet at us, or be part of the social media conversation using the hashtag BehindTheMissionWBG. So far, Jeremy talked about the World Bank Group and how we ensure safety of our staff who are working in these settings. And now I want to jump into another segment of the Q&A. This one is for you, Rebecca, right? Can you give us a picture of what it's like to work on the ground? What are some of the challenges that you face, or even risks, as well as rewards?
Thank you, Zubeida. Yeah, in my sector, social protection and jobs, the projects are in the insecure areas often cash transfer programs accompanied by a human capital building program. So this typically has three elements. First, we need to find the poorest in the country. We call that targeting. It's done with a survey or something like that. And then the poorest people receive a small cash transfer every month, every couple of months to meet the basic needs. And then they receive accompanying measures to get the kids into school, to get people fed regularly, and also to get people in touch with the health centers and the sick people to health. And we also help families build up their businesses and make them more productive. So that is the package of the project. You can imagine that along the value chain I've just described, once violence enters the equation, several things at risk, like the targeting, finding the poorest. You can't just go out with a survey, send people to the field. So you need to think about new technology. Maybe you do a phone survey, or maybe you target more on food insecurity using satellite imagery and looking for the affected areas. Paying the cash transfers. You can't group people in a big group and handing them cash. That is much more vulnerable than, for example, mobile phone transfers through a decentralized network of mobile phone distributors. So we're switching to technology along this value chain. And the same for the social work, the accompanying measures, getting people into schools, health centers, where sometimes there is no school. So now we're exploring radio schooling in some insecure areas. And we explore, again, technology, phoning people, or even working with drones. And also, through the radio, TV, whatever the coverage is in the area. So we have to think about the challenges along our project, but also the remedies each time.
Right.
So you could say in summary, what's challenging each time is also rewarding, because you have to think about the innovation each time. But the most rewarding is that when you shivered along the way, you worried about your project, and you see that it actually worked. I mean, last week I got the data back because we were really worried that the mobile transfers wouldn't arrive at their destination because we weren't physically there to see the money distributed. So, and the phone survey wasn't very conclusive, but the mobile phone operators have their own database, and they can very securely ascertain that an individual really received their money, and over 90% actually received their money. So that's just seeing that it works is just very comforting in the end.
Over 90% is a good reward, wouldn't you agree? No, this is really nice to kind of like hear this. Jeremy, now we have 3 common questions from our online audience. And these are what are the kind of jobs we are trying to fill, and what skills we are looking for in candidates, and where these jobs will be based. So this is all you, Jeremy.
Well, thank you again. Let me just begin by the very, perhaps most important skill that one must have, which is really some of what Rebecca was referring to, which is really having a passion for development, having a passion for making a difference in people's lives. Once you have that, then of course we're looking at technical skills. We're looking at people that can help governments create the right sets of policies and environment to create jobs, people that can actually bring in policies and guidance with respect to creation of entrepreneurial spirit and small business development. Obviously education is one of them, health services is another one. And so what you have listed on our website is about 56 jobs that are all related to those types of technical areas. We want to have people that are not only passionate about development, have the right skills, but also value the local context and the local culture so that development is done within those kinds of parameters. And if you apply for a job today, or if you see that your skills don't necessarily match what we have posted today, keep us in mind.
Yes.
Because these jobs keep on changing. Today we have about 100, but they're not going to be the same jobs next month or the month after. So that's what we're looking for.
These are all really good, and I'm hearing passion, of course, special skill sets, but also like, you know, keeping on like checking this resource when we have new jobs, because there are 100 in total, and so far we have over 50 that are up. So if you're watching, please go on over and apply on our LinkedIn. So now we have
I forgot to also mention that obviously language is also an important criteria.
Yes.
Rebecca is successful, certainly in Burkina Faso. By the way, I'm from Burkina Faso, so that's not a... Incidentally, we planned this very well. She works on Burkina Faso, in Burkina Faso, and I'm from Burkina Faso. But I think speaking French, where it's needed, obviously allows you to actually be engaged. You can't really be doing development until and unless you're engaged with the local population and the people that you're working with. And language is a critical medium for that.
That's a good addition, and I'm glad that you included it, because I think sometimes we underestimate the value of having an additional language skill. So that's really, really good to hear. So we have more questions from our social media community, and these are questions coming in from Facebook, Twitter, and of course LinkedIn. And this one is from Cleopatra Moditsi from Protecting Civilians in Conflict and Global Governance. She's an intern at the Stimson Center. So she says the World Bank Group receives thousands of applications from talented people around the world. What are the skills and experiences that stand out? And you've touched upon this, but like, tell us some of those like top tier skills. Like, all right, these meet the bar, these are in the, you know, maybe pile.
This is the question that we always and often get. So my advice to people is honestly, our job descriptions are understated. And by that I mean, when we say we need somebody with a master's degree plus 5 years, make sure you have the master's degree plus 5 years, because the person that's going to end up being selected is probably going to have more than the master's degree plus 5 years, simply because we have thousands and thousands of people that apply for it. That's the first thing.
Yep.
Make sure that your education and your professional experience match. That's how you can leverage to really be competitive.
Yeah.
In other words, if you're applying for a job in education, ideally you want to have a degree in education and has also worked in education. And we typically also look at what you've done in the last 3 years, because that's important for us.
Right.
We don't recruit people and then train them at the World Bank Group. Once we recruit you, the next day we expect you to start working. We give you an orientation of 3 days and that's about it. Nobody's going to train you for your job and about your job.
Right.
We recruit you based on the understanding that you can step in and do the job. And last but not least, analytical skills. People can analyze, make sense out of data. That's very important. But the minimum is a master's degree plus 5 years for most of our jobs.
So minimum is master's degree, 5 years, but also you have to make sure that you're ready when they recruit you, that is the World Bank Group, that you're ready to just, hit the ground running and start working. This is really all good to know. Another question comes in from Twitter, and the handle is at Bochi_friends. I hope I got that right, at Bochi_friends. So his or her question is, are you accepting applications from persons with disabilities? I'm a person with disability waiting for my PhD certificate.
We do, and I'm glad that we got this question, because we do. We are in the space of development, and without really being open and being inclusive, there can't be development. So we do encourage women to apply, persons with disability to apply, and we will make the accommodation to make sure that the person is not only included, integrated, but also successful at work.
That's really good to hear. Now, thank you for joining us on Behind the Mission here at the World Bank Group. As you can see behind us, there's a special job fair going on as part of our efforts to increase the World Bank Group's support of countries that are faced with fragility, conflict, and violence. Now, we'll try to answer all of your questions during this broadcast, but you can also type in your web browser World Bank Group Recruitment Drive for Fragility, Conflict, and Violence Initiative in your search browser. And you'll see all this information coming up with the current job opportunities that we have listed. You heard from Jeremy, who is the recruitment manager, saying that we already have over 50 jobs listed. So go on over and browse through and see which one you qualify for. Now, Jeremy, for the part that I kind of love, it's kind of like Mythbusters. It's like a fun game. We're unpacking all the myths we've heard about working at the bank, right? Particularly in fragility, conflict, and violence settings. Jeremy and Rebecca, we would like to know your most honest reactions to this. So I'm going to read out the myth, and you each react to the same myth. Myth 1, conflict and violence events happen everywhere in an FCV country. Rebecca.
Absolutely not true. It's like the truth is in the nuance. So if a country is marked FCV, it doesn't mean the entire country is FCV. It's like even you have like red zones, yellow zones, green zones, and even within the red zone, the red regions, you'd find provinces and towns that are safe, basically, or safer. So there's a lot of nuance, and to be able to work there, we need to know this nuance. Right. And that's where the system comes in, where we talked about earlier, that the security specialist who stays up to date as to which city is safe, which one isn't, because the conflict's dynamic. But there's a lot of nuance, and usually the capital is safe, usually bigger cities are safe, the center or the south of the country may be safe. But I'm not aware of, well, maybe apart from Yemen, as you mentioned, or if the entire country is in civil war, I'm not aware of an FCV country where actually the entire country is affected.
I totally agree with that. Another way of looking at it is kind of saying to yourself, well, we live in Washington, D.C., and there are some neighborhoods where I don't go to, right? And you wouldn't go to. Are we making them into FCVs? No. So
this is good
it's a matter of scale.
All right, are you ready for myth number 2?
Yes.
Myth number 2 says countries categorized as FCV are not livable. Jeremy.
There are. Well, first of all, I'm from Burkina Faso.
Yes.
And Burkina Faso is now an FCV. I was there in August visiting my parents. True, there are. Life is difficult and challenging, but in the big cities where it's peaceful, people go on about their businesses. there's also some built-in resiliency that people actually acquire after a while. And that's where they need us to be there to extend that resiliency and help them make that bridge into a peaceful transition and peace in the society.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know, Rebecca, you've lived in an FCV country or worked in one,
That's
so
right.
I want to hear your take on this.
Actually, it's the first time I lived in an FCV country or country that was affected by FCV was in the early 90s in Colombia. When Colombia was in the drug war and Pablo Escobar had just escaped from prison, was putting a car bomb every other day in the capital. And I still felt safe because every setting is different. In that particular case, Pablo Escobar would announce where he put it, so you could avoid the area. But just like that, FCV countries can be very, very livable. So next week I'm going, not next week, next month I'm going to Burkina Faso, but yes. Jeremy has already talked about that. Cameroon, another country that's affected by FCV, it's really only one particular part of the country that's affected. The capital is totally livable. Douala on the coast is totally livable. It's a beautiful country. I even recommend it for tourism. It has amazing landscapes. People call it l'Afrique en miniature, miniature Africa.
Oh!
So it's very livable. Same Kinshasa. It's like a colleague just went there and she posts a photo a day on Facebook, and what I see looks great.
Yeah.
They go jogging after work. Like Kinshasa as a city looks very livable.
Right.
Whereas DRC, as the big country that it is, certainly has areas where we wouldn't go.
Yeah.
This is really good to hear, and I love these very realistic examples of like what day-to-day life is, like the friend who's posting the photos of where they're spending time.
Yeah.
This is really good to hear. So we're coming to the myth number 3 that talks about when you are in an FCV country, it means you are at risk. How do we react to this, Rebecca?
You are not. You're definitely not, because there's a security specialist who briefs you on what behaviors to avoid. And if you avoid those and you stay in the vetted hotels, you're even more than safe, because they err on the conservative side. There's no zero risk. I think we have to admit there's no zero risk, but there's no zero risk in DC either. And often the biggest risk we face here is a traffic accident, and not an FCV related risk.
This is really good to hear. How about you, Jeremy?
No, I totally agree with Rebecca. I think you're in an environment that has risks embedded in it, but I think you can take comfort in the fact that the institution itself is really looking after you. They will provide you with the briefings. They will let you know the minute they feel like your safety is at risk, and you will be taken out of that location as quickly as possible.
Good. So you've had it. Most of these are myths. You've had it straight from Rebecca and Jeremy. FCV countries are livable. Not the entire country is like filled with FCV, that is violence, conflict, and fragility. And you are not at risk entirely if you're in an FCV country, right? Because there could be pockets of the places where, this is more prevalent than before. If you've just joined us, we're almost at the tail end of the conversation. You are watching Behind the Mission here at the World Bank Group. We are holding a special recruitment drive to increase the support that the World Bank has in the countries that have been affected by violence, conflict, and fragility. And so before we wrap up, Rebecca and Jeremy, I would love to hear some words of encouragement, especially for those interested in our crucial work in working in FCV countries. Jeremy, would you like to share your personal story, particularly being born and raised in Burkina?
No, I grew up in Burkina, and actually I was born in a small village called Konea, which is about 5K from Kaya. And that village actually didn't have a school, elementary school, until 1994. By then I had a doctorate degree, and I had already taught in 2 universities in the US.
Wow.
What it means is if my parents hadn't moved from that village, by the way, the children from my uncles didn't go to school, but if they hadn't moved from that location, I probably wouldn't have had the same opportunity, probably wouldn't have gone to school, probably wouldn't be sitting here. And so really what we're talking about here is our collective commitment and passion to opening up and offering the same opportunities to people who are living in those conditions in those countries, so that they can have those opportunities like everybody else.
Right.
And get a chance to apply themselves, whether it's in education, entrepreneurship, get themselves to actually benefit from the fruit of what we call development, which is really improving their own well-being.
Right.
Everybody is committed to having a better life.
Yes.
But they need help from either international organization or the types of skills and support that we can each bring to those locations.
Oh, this is so heartwarming to hear your story, Jeremy. Thank you for sharing that. And we hope you have been inspired just hearing that. Rebecca, how about you?
I think in summary, I would like to say, as I sort of mentioned before, every challenge carries its reward. So if somebody feels an itch to innovate, to be creative, to find solutions to challenges, to be entrepreneurial, I think then working on FCV with us might be the right thing for them.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeremy and Rebecca, and to you, our online audience, for joining us today. You can continue getting updates and sharing in the conversation using the hashtag #BehindTheMissionWBG. Now, fragility, conflict, and violence is a critical development challenge that threatens efforts to end extreme poverty. Did you know by 2030, FCV countries will be home to 46% of the world's extreme poor? Now, as an institution, the World Bank Group is committed to address this challenge head on. And we hope the conversation we've had today with Jeremy, our recruitment manager, and Rebecca, a senior economist in the social protection and jobs area, particularly in the FCV country, has inspired you to get behind the mission to help end extreme poverty and boost shared prosperity. I am Zubaida Robinson, and it's been fun having you.